Hi, I'm Matt, founder of Work in Fintech. I'm also CEO of a fintech firm called iPushPull and co-founder of another fintech called NewsQuark. And what we want to do in these episodes is teach you all about fintech. So today I'm joined by Helene Lipp, who's just finished a master's at Bath University. And I'm also joined by Chris Scott, who works at TP ICAP. So over to you, Helen.
Hi, Chris. It's nice having you here. Before we jump into fintech, could you just explain what you do, who you work for, and where does that intersect with fintech?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Matt. Hi, Helen. So, thank you for having me. I run product and delivery for the equities and equity derivatives team at TP ICAP. What it kind of means in reality is I spend kind of half my time working with the kind of senior stakeholders in the front office and commercial areas, figuring out kind of where we're looking to invest, what opportunities exist in the market, and the kind of other half of my time actually delivering those with a combination of business analysts, product owners, developers, testers, and so on.
Could you just explain what product management is for our listeners and why it is important in fintech?
Sure, I think product management is quite a wide used term to cover a multitude of things, and it very greatly depends on which company you're at as to exactly what product management is or can be. A lot of companies see it as a very kind of technical role. A lot of companies see it as kind of a more client-facing market research type role. And across the spectrum, you get a combination of roles appear. You can see product marketing management versus outright product management. But it's ultimately the purpose of product management is to ensure a kind of value owner for what you're doing and what you're trying to deliver. Someone that is a bit more in the weeds than the kind of commercial decision makers, but someone that's still at the end of the day looking at what value we're delivering. What are we actually trying to achieve with this project or with this kind of thing you're trying to create? So in technology and in finance, a lot of the things we're doing are replacing the current systems and processes we have in place. How do we automate those? But all of those systems and processes were built and were put in place for a reason. We derive as a firm and our clients derive as firms value from all of those processes. So if we're not focused on what we were doing in the first place and why we were doing that, ultimately you can end up with a product that doesn't actually solve a problem for your client or stop solving the problem that you were solving for originally. And the second you start doing that, you lose value, you lose customers, and ultimately you give your competitors an edge that they didn't have. A lot of the kind of forward-looking things as well. You've got to understand exactly why and how markets evolved to where they got to and why your clients are operating and what they need, what problems do they have. And again, it comes down to solving and adding value by solving those problems.
You mentioned a very important keyword, which is technology. And technology and automation is now very fundamental to financial markets. Could you just explain, in your opinion, why it is so important and why students and graduates should embrace it in their career choices?
Yeah, there's two big elements that I see that technology really adds value and the really important things, and they don't really kind of necessarily come naturally. The first is obviously scale, and it's not limited to finance, but ultimately, if you don't have technology, it's very hard to scale any kind of process or any kind of operation you have. If you can digitalize something, you can do it again and again and again. Your cost per process run is very cheap, and it makes you able to perform that operation thousands of times a day, an hour, a second. The second is reliability. Any kind of process or anything you do manually inherently has a level of risk of human error in it. And we pass data around at such high rates in trying to achieve what we're trying to do, be it kind of some kind of execution strategy on an exchange, or be it any kind of post-trade service in finance. You're passing a huge amount of data around, and any time you get that wrong, you cause a kind of a misalignment of risk between what the client thinks they've traded and what they know in their risk profile, or you try and settle something incorrectly, and it costs money every time you make a mistake. And when it comes down to importance of technology, it's about the reliability. It's about, again, being able to do that process and that same function again and again and again in a very, very error-free manner.
Also, when you look at, because you mentioned the keywords scale and liability, how do you see this, especially the technology in these terms, and are affecting brokers and trading technology in the next 5, 10, or even 20 years?
I think you've certainly seen a lot of firms hire a very different kind of person in the past decade or so. They've moved away from people and kind of huge banks of traders to a very few or select number of traders, backed up by kind of huge armies of developers, of testers, of business analysts, there to achieve that aim. They know that, and with the way the kind of market structure has worked, played out over time, to access and operate, it's become a speed race in many instances. So you have to go faster and faster and faster. And it's less about trading strategies. There's a lot of technology around to help people refine those and let individual and the best and brightest individual traders scale. Again, they can test multiple strategies very easily with the kind of caliber of people that they build around as a team.
Is this also what excites you mostly about your role and also working in product management, the pace or also other factors?
I find I've always been very interested in kind of how do we change the world, how do we make things better, how do we improve things, how do we drive and how do we compete, how do we come up with a new idea to transform a market, how do we come up with an idea to kind of steal market share from a competitor. So I find being in product management and the kind of combination of working on those ideas and the opportunities to discover them and find them as well as implement them is quite a good balance and quite an exciting thing. I don't ever feel like I'm actually getting up to do a kind of 9 to 5 job where you've got to grind through it and it's the same thing day to day. Every kind of few months what I'm working on changes fairly drastically. Like in the past few months we've been focusing on the kind of trading side of the world, and in the next few months we're looking at kind of how do we employ chatbots to automate a lot of the kind of core functionality and requests we get through from our clients. And I find it pretty exciting to see that kind of change day to day, and it's a career that if you are creative, if you're client focused and trying to look for problems to solve, you can derive a lot of value and interest from.
Okay, thank you for your answer, of course. I think a lot of us are also very interested in product management. So for me, it's interesting to know if this career path, which really led to product management at ICAP, was planned or did you fall into it accidentally?
I guess it's a happy accident looking back. It was certainly not planned. I got into TP ICAP, didn't manage to make it into university, so kind of my original plan. And so I started on one of the desks as a junior. I just saw an advert online that was about running and grabbing lunches and delivering local parcels and booking trades. And I thought, well, I've got to start somewhere. And got into the industry that way. Didn't really properly grasp quite the scale of the business or the operation or how it all worked. And you throw in there was a young guy on a desk. It's quite a wild environment. It was something akin to the Wolf of Wall Street when I started. But that's changed radically in the past kind of 13 or 14 years. And the brokers are like, being a broker is a very hard thing to do because you've got to sit there and do the same thing day to day, and you've got to coerce your clients into giving you business, and you've got to be a very, very relentless kind of salesperson. And I was sitting there on the desk going to my boss, what about if we do it this way, or why don't we try that, or why don't we get this bit of technology, why don't we go and purchase this product that can make us better as a firm. And without even meaning to, I got a shot broking, but what even while I was doing that I was constantly nagging for how do we change things, to the point they kind of said, look, get off the desk, go and sit with this guy who does all our kind of business development stuff and see what we can come up with. And they just kind of gave me a shot, called me a business analyst, threw me under this guy and gave me an opportunity to go and kind of look at a couple of problems that I said about and wanted to go and fix. And one of the kind of problems I worked on, I managed to come up with a decent solution for it. And they gave me the gig and said, right, carry on. But it was certainly not planned. I had eyes on, like when I first joined, get on the desk, get on the phones, become a broker. It was a very different career path in the end.
You have worked at very different roles at ICAP, for example, as a broker, but also as a business analyst, and then ultimately as a product manager. How did you approach learning new skills in each different area, and what transferable skills were there across each role you could use?
The transferable side, I think, comes down to kind of the problem solving. I'm always looking at what problems out there, how do we try and fix them. I'm naturally, I guess, I've got a lot of creativity and that helps a lot. When you're talking to clients, when you're looking at, you have to go from either looking at a big set of data and figuring out actually like what do the numbers look like from evaluating an opportunity to, well actually let's sit down with some developers and talk about how we're going to implement it. And each time I've moved role, I've spent time naturally building kind of more technical skills and how do I interrogate data, how do I get access to kind of greater data. In the more recent years, I spent more time figuring out how do I better structure and position arguments for investment, because ultimately we spend a lot of time, and it's very easy to come up with great ideas, but some of the good ideas we've had in the past and some of the things that I'm kind of most gutted that we never did were in part down to kind of my failure to really convince the people around and above me to invest or back that idea.
You mentioned a very important keyword, which is skills. For example, if I were a student who wants to work in a product management role in a financial technology firm, what hard skills or soft skills would you expect? And would you more look for a generalist or more for a specialist in the role?
I think it varies greatly depending on what area of the firm you're looking to go. And generally speaking, we try and look at our business analysts internally as product owners. So halfway between being a BA and very technical and halfway between product management. I think that it's a lot of people come in and where we've hired junior product people, it takes a couple of years of really kind of understanding what's going on before you can really get a grasp of what it's truly about. And I think you have to be prepared to kind of work hard in the weeds as a business analyst is a very good starting position because you get the security of actually you can come in and you can do a function and work on some projects and start understanding actually all the infrastructure that's there. And when you learn and understand that infrastructure, you'll then start, if you're that way minded, you'll start seeing the problems in it. You'll start seeing the problems in the processes, lean on that infrastructure and have people involved. You'll look at the way the clients interact with you across that infrastructure. And that infrastructure could be technology, it could be people-based, it could be a combination of both. Everything you do in finance is a combination of people and technology. No matter how many computers are there, there's still someone at the end of the day, even if it's only one or two people, they're involved in the process somehow. And a lot of the value is in automating the smaller functions that teams do or someone does on a regular basis, be it a trader or be it someone internally. So you've got to come in and you've got to be prepared to spend a long time learning that environment. A lot of product managers fall into that role or are pushed into that role over time because they have a good understanding of that environment and they're willing to go out on a limb to try and change it. You can't just come in and turn around and go, right, give me a product, I know how to get the value from it, right? That's not really product management. It's not kind of forward looking and going, actually, how do I evolve this? How do I keep up with my competitors? How do I get ahead of them? There's a very technical aspect to product management in a lot of firms, which is very much, right, you're working for the APIs, go and design the APIs, go and add these fields. That's more akin to really what I would refer to as business analyst. The term has become kind of blended because people want to be called a product manager, they don't want to be called a business analyst. But in reality, the good product managers, the best product managers all come from some kind of technical role or business analyst role where they've spent a lot of time learning and understanding that kind of subject.
Do you believe also, because you mentioned that it's very important, of course, to have technical skills, would you consider students or graduates who don't really have many technical skills but curiosity, would you give them a chance and why?
It's a biased question really. Having not gone to university myself and being given a chance, it's hard for me to say I shouldn't give someone a chance, I wouldn't. Ultimately, the world is a very competitive place, and while I don't think for a second that there's a big desire that everyone should code, right, and kids should code, I think that's flawed slightly. People should understand how to code and the impact of it, and people should be good at kind of scripting. So SQL or being able to just queue up some kind of batch job and run it. And I think that kind of base level of skill is definitely required because it helps you process and understand a lot of data very quickly. And it helps you, and you need to have some basic kind of skills. If you want to present a business case or an argument, right, you have to understand what are the financial implications of this, right? If I'm twisting this part of the process, you have to be able to both qualify the kind of impact that has and then turn that into some kind of argument or calculation for what's the value in automating this, how much is this going to cost. So you've got to be relatively good technically, but you certainly don't need to code, right? You need to be able to pseudocode, right? You need to sit there and explain the kind of logical steps and write some kind of if statement, but you don't need to be able to do it in Java or C# or anything like that. You just need to be able to put it in a way that a developer and a business analyst can take it and go, right, here's the problem I'm solving for, here's how that algorithm's supposed to work, or here's the end result, and you can have that discussion. And you need to be able to understand back the limitations of technology and what you may or may not have in the firm. So you need to be fairly competent in that regard. But when I'm hiring, I look for people that have got some kind of scripting. Python, great, but realistically, if you can log onto a database and start tearing it apart, and then the bigger challenge is trying to find someone that you could give a database to. The SQL bit's the easy part, but can they, if you give them a database in the dark, could they figure out what is going on in that database and the relationships between the tables and stuff like that? It's that kind of figuring out of how things relate and interact that you want to look for and you want to test for when you're interviewing people, and that soft skill is very hard to find and very rare to find. A lot of people are very good at doing retrospective analysis on a problem that's already been kind of solved, where you've got the perfect data set for, but we don't operate in a world where you have a perfect data set. So how do you produce a good estimate for your solution, right? One that you're comfortable backing, one that you go and pitch to clients and test with clients without looking silly, right? You've got to be relatively good at that.
And how important is in terms of like the soft skills when you're dealing with, I suppose, in a way, your customers, your clients are the guys on the business end the guys on the desk. How much have you used your kind of negotiation skills and soft skills to be able to argue a kind of a good idea you may have, and similarly push back on ideas that you think doesn't actually make sense in terms of what you're seeing on the product side and technology side? And obviously dealing with probably brokers on a desk could be potentially confrontational. How have you handled that in the past as well?
Yeah, the brokers are obviously someone I deal with regularly, and they're a very interesting and different bunch. There's a different dynamic with them to deal with other people. Where I spent 3 or 4 years on a broking desk, it was all kind of water for ducks back now. You get used to, and where I started, as I said, it's a very different place to where I started. But where I started, getting shouted at on a daily basis, or pens lobbed at you if you made a mistake, or whatever was normal, right? And you develop a thick skin quickly, or you just can't cut it. So I never worry about dealing with brokers, and you just take them at face value. You just got to remember with everyone, not just brokers, it's important when approaching a trader to pitch your product, or anyone internally, right? Try and have a lot of empathy and think about how they feel about their product, right? If you're going to automate an operations process, don't just walk into operations and go, guys, look, this is a great idea. Because it might be a great idea, and it might be a great idea for the firm, but it doesn't mean it's great for that person. The same for brokers, right? If you want to automate and make the product they're trading electronic, right? Just go, guys, look, we can make this electronic, great, but how's that guy feel? How's that guy going to take it? And certainly in my younger days, I certainly didn't have that kind of natural level of empathy. I just roared about going, we can do all this stuff, we can do that, and occasionally someone biting the idea and would do it, and it'd be a lot of fun, and sometimes it'd work and sometimes it wouldn't. And these days, I certainly try less ideas, but the success rate in terms of getting people bought into those ideas is definitely much higher. And a lot of it's about spending the time before you're going to see the traders to talk about the idea. Think about, as a trader, how am I going to take this product? Does this really add value to my life? Is this something that's like nice to have, but how important really is it to me? Then for the trader, like, he's going to buy your product. How's he going to get it through his teams internally, right? You've got to think about, well, actually, how are you adding value, or how are you solving, and how are you solving problems for several people with this solution, and how do you position that? And then internally, you've got to position it correctly to the right people. And it's not about misrepresenting what you're doing. It's just about having the skill of, should I even tell this person what we're looking at this? Even like back to the operations example, right? You've got that great idea. Even if you go up to like 1 or 2 levels up from the kind of operations guy, what's his manager motivated by? How much process and how many people they run? You have to take these ideas relatively high up the chain and build that. And you have to rely on your internal network to do these things, but you've got to take it relatively high up the chain to the point where who's the person in operations actually motivated by simplifying this process and reducing this cost? Or who on the business side is the sponsor for that, and who's picking up that bill at the end of the day? Go and find that person, push the idea to them, and then build up a kind of team around about how we're going to take it and move it forward.
Do you think it became more difficult in the last years or in the last 10 years to really get the connections, to really find the network, to really get the right person you need? Or do you think it hasn't changed?
Right, internally or?
Yeah, like internally, like really who's doing what, whom can I ask for that? Do you think it has become more difficult?
In a big organisation especially, you rely heavily on that internal network. You rely on kind of your internal brand. And they act in a very different manner to smaller organisations where you've got a very small number of people focused on the same goal. Internally, at a big corporation, you've got a lot of different teams, and the alignment between teams, unless the organisation run very, very efficiently. And we've got clients who are looking at how do we innovate, how do we adopt new solutions. Internally, for us, it's getting easier to get investment into projects and things signed off, which obviously is great because you, as a product person, you want to be trying to push forward new initiatives all the time.
And do you think the way big firms look at fintech has changed in the last couple of years as well? You know, obviously cloud adoption in big financial institutions is, you know, in a much better place than it was a few years ago. You've also got a lot of, you know, London and UK has a very thriving fintech ecosystem. How has the ability for you to interact with small startups changed? And how's that helped, I suppose, accelerate what you do in your role?
I think fintech is still a dangerous term to use in big organisations because even though we are deploying technology in finance, there's a kind of connotation that comes with fintech of, oh, it's a bit fast and loose. It can be a bit haphazard, it can be a bit risky. The bigger the organisation, generally speaking, the the more risk averse they often are, the more they want to try and risk manage anything. And ultimately, finance is all about risk management, right? You're constantly managing, whether it's from a trading perspective, economic risk, whether you're in the technology side, which essentially is kind of managing data risk, right? Whether it's IT security or whether it's whatever product you're doing, you still got to manage the risk in terms of moving data from point A to point B with some kind of transition to it or transformation to it along the line. So I think without using that term, they've certainly opened it up and gone, actually, we do need to invest. These fintech firms are going to come and eat our lunch if we don't invest in technology. They just haven't called it fintech.
Going back to, I love your story about applying for a job you saw online and working your way up and so on. But you later did an MBA a few years ago. So that's probably quite an unusual path for someone to, not do a degree and then later do an MBA when you've been 10 years or so into your career. Why did you decide to do that, and what did you think it offers you? Because students today who are coming through kind of the system, they're obviously, you do a bachelor's degree, and there's a lot of people now that do a master's degree because they feel like they need to differentiate themselves. Then there's this a bit of a leap then to doing an MBA. What would you say that gave to you in both connections and people and in terms of learning?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of underwhelmed, frankly, on the connections and people side of things. The cohort I was with just weren't kind of naturally, there was a lot of people from outside of finance, and I ran it at CAS. They spent a lot of time trying to get people from outside of finance into the cohort because typically I think they've had very finance dominated years previously. For me personally, there was a combination of kind of personal ambition of I kind of messed up in the second year of my A-levels, didn't get into university as a result of that. So I wanted to go back and prove to myself and to my parents as well that I could actually do it. But you do take a lot away from it. Ultimately, when you're trying to balance work, family, and then 30 hours of study a week on top of that, you've got to be all in on it. And I think that I'd certainly benefited more from doing it later because of that. And had I gone and done it when I was 19, 20, I wouldn't have spent it or worked as hard at university. And it certainly gave me a good degree in terms of how do I structure things better? How do I use, there's a lot of frameworks about that most people don't know about for how do you analyse kind of your company's position in a marketplace, or how do you analyse an opportunity? How do you quickly quantify and compute net present value? As I said, where you're in kind of product management, you're pushing from kind of one thing to another very quickly, and you need a very wide and diverse set of skills to case for those situations. You need to be able to understand what people are talking about very quickly, and it just kind of helped broaden your mind in terms of actually, how do I present this to this person? I want to talk, and there's a lot of time on the kind of business math side of things, helps you deal with the kind of finance teams internally and understand what's important to them. There's other ways of work, and that can be useful as well when you're trying to seek investment, right? You go and ask for £1 million. It's much easier to ask for £1 million if you can turn around to the finance team and say, I want to capitalise it over 10 years because that's the life of this product and we can appreciate it accordingly. That's a much stronger argument than this, look, it's £1 million, but I think we're going to make 10 from it. It helps you just position. And one of the things that really stuck with me in the kind of earlier lectures, they said, don't view this as a degree for pure learning's sake. View this as a degree for helping you understand all of the importance of all the functions across the organisation. And it really does, if you look at it that way and take it on board that way, which I try to, it does open your mind to actually things that I hadn't really considered before, like culture and how important that is to an organisation, and actually how important it is kind of as I'm stepping up kind of through the ranks now, it is to make sure that the culture in my team is one that's pretty progressive and one that I want to be proud of, as opposed to kind of a 1990s type culture where it's how do I get the most out of people and kind of grind them out, and when they're gone just get someone in. It's how do you inspire and foster a culture of kind of creativity. And I think if you've got a group of people that are very happy and motivated, you'll naturally get good performance out of them and you get more as a result. But you've got to learn and sit down on these things, and a lot of people, it's just kind of not natural to kind of always think about that. I'm naturally a more kind of technically oriented type guy, right? I like to get stuck into the weed of these things. So to have that reminder and like look back and go, actually need to think about this and factor that into what we're trying to do as well. As the structure stuff of putting arguments forward, it helps a lot in that regard. It was kind of a good refresher on maths and stuff that I've done 10 years or so in the past. If you don't use it, you do lose it to a degree, right? And ultimately, there's a lot of things you'll do. Like sometimes I'll spend 2 or 3 months working on a project, needing the kind of SQL skills, and I'll be like, I haven't done this for a year or two. And you spend half your time figuring out, right, how do I do that in a job or whatever. You spend half your time trying to remember that. And No matter what it is, whether it's a technical skill like that or a more soft skill, it's important to have that refresher, to have those kind of references. And then it opens you up to a lot of other people as well. Like the cohort were very interesting. We got to do a lot of abroad type placements and see a lot of other companies and how they operate. And it's good. Like if you can take, I've always had a mantra, if you read a book, take 2 things from that book and apply it to what you're doing with your life. Yeah, you're never going to do more than that, but just read that book or whatever it's about. Take 2 bits from it, apply it to your life. And if you can do that from an MBA, like every month I was just trying to take one more thing from that and actually how do I just improve what I'm doing day to day. And it really did make a difference in terms of where I was and where I got to as a result of that. And it does kind of help shape you and it knocks some of the edges off you. As when you're younger, you don't realise kind of how rough around the edges you are. And it's too easy to be like, I've got all these great ideas, I should be in charge. When in actual fact, the people that are best in being in charge are often the ones that don't have the great ideas, but they're the ones that can nurture and help you understand and shape and put forward that idea, can assess the ideas being put forward quite critically, very quickly, and either give you the feedback you need to kind of make the idea work, or stop you wasting your time on an idea that isn't going to go anywhere.
You've mentioned creativity a couple of times throughout this conversation. How would you kind of advise people who are looking to get into product management to harness that creativity? Is there any things they could start doing or thinking about?
It's a hard question. I think creativity, a lot of people either have it or you don't. It's one of those things that you can't really learn, right? It's like trying to run, like you're saying, Bolt. I can spend all day practicing 100 meters, but I'll never be anywhere close to as fast as him, right? You have it or you don't, right? You're either naturally a good problem solver or you're not. And if you want to try and test and see where your kind of level's at, go and look at the Google-esque type interview questions and see how you do. Because things like that, they're not trying to test you or catch you out in terms of can you get the right answer. They want to see how you're approaching that problem. What's your critical thinking like when you're looking at a problem, right? How many different ways can you view a problem? They generally don't care about the answer. They want to see how you're approaching it. And the best way to kind of go and see where you're ranking at and be open-minded, right? Don't worry about being embarrassed or coming up with a stupid answer in interviews. That moment of awkwardness often leads to a point where actually you've got a more open and candid discussion.
Cool. Okay, so to finish off then, if you were to kind of meet a younger version of yourself when you were starting out and kind of knowing what you know now, would you have any advice to give yourself back then?
Be more patient, take more time about how you approach things. Like one bit of advice that someone gave me the 5 or 6 years after I started was overnight success takes 15 years. And I thought, it sounds like a long time, but it's true, right? You have to be patient and you have to just be thought out. And had I taken that approach a bit more at times, I think I would have maybe moved up and gone further earlier in my career. But if you're too pushy, if you're not empathetic enough, if you're always in a rush or driving too hard, people's natural instinct is to push back and go, whoa, slow down. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. But if you're too pushy, a lot of people get very defensive about it and just like, you're being a pain now, just stop, just relax, you'll get there, right? We like you, we think you're good, that's why you work for us. And I think a lot of people don't tell you that, so you've got to remind yourself that, look, if you get the job and you give them the gig, it's because they think you're good enough. Just be patient, demonstrate the skills, look for what you're being asked to do. If you can solve a problem, put it together, structure it, spend the time on it. If it takes you 3 months to put it together around everything else you're doing, put it forward. But patience is definitely an attribute that I think I'm still learning, but I certainly didn't have it at all when I started.
Other skills you would say or other characteristics you think are very important for like students or graduates trying to learn patience?
No, it's a soft one again, right? Be prepared to work hard on junior stuff. A lot of grads I've interviewed over the years, we were hiring a couple of years ago for a junior product guy, and I think I interviewed 20, 25 graduates, and the ambition on these guys and ladies was phenomenal, and they were clearly super smart people. The biggest problem I had was I didn't think there was any one of them that I looked at that I thought, you're going to come in and you're going to spend 2 years working hard and learning and understanding this environment. Because you can't just come in and be a superstar overnight. It doesn't happen. Also, if someone asks you in an interview, any questions for me, never say, how long to earn 100 grand a year? Because that quick way to not have a second interview.
Yeah, that's a good way to get a big no, isn't it?
Absolutely thumbs down right there.
Great. Okay, on that note, Chris Scott, Senior Product Manager for Equities at TP ICAP, thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Helen.